My wife picked her family over me after they gave her an ultimatum, them or me. I wouldn't pay for their crypto plan, so I took her at her word. My wife, Olivia, looked me dead in the eye and said, "I choose them." In that single, chilling moment, my entire world didn't just crack, it shattered, because I knew I was watching our 4-year marriage die right in front of me. The air in our living room was thick with unspoken accusations and a betrayal so deep I could almost taste it. Her family sat around us, a silent jury, but it was Olivia's unwavering gaze that truly sealed my fate. And honestly, as devastating as it was, I wasn't even shocked then. More than anything, I just felt done. It was like the final, brutal move in a game they'd all been playing behind my back for weeks. I found out later they had an entire text thread dedicated to my money and how to reel me in. But at the time, all I saw was Olivia, the woman I'd built a life with, choosing her parents and siblings over our marriage like it was nothing. I'm 35, and until this whole mess blew up, I genuinely thought we had one of those stable, low-drama marriages people envy. We had our routines, shared hobbies, separate friend groups that got along, and what I thought were crystal-clear agreements about money and boundaries. From the very beginning, we decided to keep our finances separate. We both worked, and we both came into the marriage with our own savings and debts. Before I even met Olivia, I had $85,000 saved up. That wasn't just luck, it was years of working overtime, living in cheap apartments, and saying no to every trip or expense I couldn't truly afford. That money was my foundation, my safety net. I planned to use it either as a down payment on a house or to finally start a small business when the timing felt right. Olivia, my fiancée then, knew about my savings in general terms, and we explicitly agreed it would remain mine, premarital money. For the first few years, it was a total non-issue. We split rent based on income, handled bills without a fuss, and if one of us was a little short, the other picked up the slack without making it a big deal. Things started to shift when her brother, Caleb, discovered cryptocurrency. He got incredibly lucky on one of his first trades, turning a few thousand into about $15,000 during a bull run. Overnight, he went from the guy who bounced between jobs to the finance guru of the family. He'd send everyone articles he barely understood, talking like he'd unlocked some secret rich people didn't want regular folks to know. At first, it was just annoying background noise at family dinners. Then, he announced his big idea, a family investment pool. Everyone would put in money, he'd manage it in crypto, and they'd all grow rich together. Her parents, Brenda and Arthur, bought in. Her sister, Hannah, threw money at it. A couple of cousins followed suit. Suddenly, this wasn't just Caleb's hobby, it was a full-blown family project. I said no immediately, but politely. I told him I wasn't comfortable gambling with money I couldn't afford to lose. I preferred boring, stable investments over chasing quick wins. He just brushed me off and kept pushing. What I didn't know was that Olivia had told them the exact amount I had saved. Not just he has some savings, but he has $85,000. That number turned me from a family member with boundaries into a walking bag of cash they hadn't quite convinced yet. The pressure started small. Little jokes about how I was afraid of success. Comments about how real men take risks. Little digs from Caleb and Hannah about me being too cautious. I just shrugged it off, repeated my no, and foolishly assumed Olivia had my back, just like I would have had hers. I was so wrong. The night everything blew up, Olivia told me her family wanted to come over and talk about something important. I figured it was some family news, maybe health issues, or plans for a holiday. Instead, I walked into my own apartment and saw Brenda, Arthur, Caleb, and Hannah all sitting in the living room in this weird, staged way, like I'd stumbled into a meeting I hadn't agreed to attend. Caleb immediately launched into a full presentation about how well the family pool was doing and how now was the perfect time for me to do the right thing and put in a big chunk so they could scale. I told him again, calmly, that I wasn't interested. My savings were for a house or a business, not for speculative gambling. He just smirked and said something like, "Man, you really don't get it." Then Brenda started crying, not just tearing up, but full-blown sobbing, about how real husbands share everything with their wives and how I was keeping Olivia from her family's future. Arthur jumped in, asking if I even trusted Olivia, if I saw myself as part of their family or just some outsider renting space in her life. The whole time, Olivia sat there on the couch, completely silent, staring at the floor. Not once did she tell them to back off, or say, "Hey, this isn't okay." That silence, that inaction, it hurt more than anything they said. I tried to stay steady. I explained one more time that my decision wasn't about trust or love. It was about risk, about planning, and the simple fact that I wasn't comfortable putting my entire safety net into something I didn't believe in. Caleb called me a coward. Hannah said I was holding Olivia back from a better life. Brenda cried louder. Arthur's face hardened. Then he turned to Olivia and delivered the line that detonated everything: "Make him choose. Us or him." The room went dead quiet. Olivia looked at me, then at them, then back at me. There was this long, agonizing few seconds where I honestly thought she'd finally speak up for our marriage, or at least say the whole thing had gone too far. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate breath and said, "I choose them." Like it was the most natural thing in the world. No apology, no hesitation after that breath. "No, I'm sorry." Just a clear, unwavering choice in her eyes. The silence afterward was heavier than the argument that led up to it. Her family looked almost surprised she'd actually said it out loud. I stood up, looked at her, and simply said, "Understood." That was it. No yelling, no big speech, just that one line and a decision. They all started talking at once, trying to justify, to explain, to spin it. But I was already done. I walked to our bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the initial shock settle just long enough to move past wanting to react and into wanting to act. Then I pulled out my phone and started looking up divorce attorneys in our area. I found one with great reviews who offered after-hours consultations. I sent a short email summarizing what had just happened and got a reply 20 minutes later with a time slot for that very night. While Olivia and her family were still in the living room talking in low voices, I climbed out the bedroom window easy enough, since we were on the first floor. I got in my car and drove to a coffee shop parking lot to talk to Mr. Jensen, the attorney, over the phone. I told him everything: the separate finances, the premarital savings, the coordinated pressure, the ultimatum, her choice. He listened intently, asked a few pointed questions, and then laid it out simply. Because we had no kids, separate finances, and a clear division of property, the divorce could be straightforward if I moved quickly and didn't waver. He emailed me a retainer agreement right there on the call. I signed it on my phone, sitting in my car, and told him to start whatever he needed to start first thing Monday morning. When I got back home later that night, her family was gone, and Olivia was asleep in bed, or at least pretending to be. I didn't wake her. I packed a bag with enough clothes for a week, grabbed my important documents from the safe, and left before sunrise to check into a cheap hotel. Monday morning, I met Mr. Jensen in person, signed the official paperwork, and by that evening, Olivia had been listed as the respondent in a divorce filing she didn't even know existed yet. Over the next 2 days, while she was at work, I hired movers to clear out everything that was clearly mine: my furniture, my electronics, my clothes, my personal items. We'd always kept most big purchases separate, so it wasn't hard to draw the line. I left her furniture, her decor, her kitchen stuff, anything that was hers or that we'd clearly bought for her. When the movers were done, the place looked like a stripped-down version of our life, and that felt fitting. On the kitchen counter, I left the apartment keys and a simple note with my lawyer's contact information and one line that said, "As you chose, so shall it be." Then I walked out and didn't look back. I moved into a small studio apartment across town, updated my address, changed my banking info, and told HR at work that I was going through a divorce and didn't want personal calls or visitors getting through without my permission. I blocked Olivia and every member of her family on my phone and social media before she even saw the empty apartment. A couple of days later, my attorney emailed to say she'd been served and was in shock, asking if this was real or some kind of stunt. It wasn't a stunt. It was me finally believing what she'd told me when she said, "I choose them," and acting like she genuinely meant it. The thing about Olivia is she honestly thought I was bluffing. I didn't know that at first, but during the legal process, I saw messages where she told her family things like, "He'll cool off in a few days," and "This is just his way of making a point." Like I was a teenager slamming doors instead of a grown man ending a marriage. That first night, she apparently called my phone over and over, not understanding that blocked means blocked. And when that didn't work, she started sending long texts I never saw. Her family was just as sure I'd come crawling back. Caleb told everyone I'd realize how dumb I was being and come around, ready to invest, once I'd gotten it out of my system. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my new apartment, eating takeout on a folding chair, going over documents with Mr. Jensen, and feeling weirdly calm. The divorce filing wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. It was the only logical conclusion once she made it clear I wasn't her first choice, or even close. At our second meeting, Mr. Jensen looked at me and said, "Most people are a lot more conflicted at this stage. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I told him I'd never been more sure of anything. The moment she chose her family in that living room was the moment our marriage ended. Everything else was just paperwork. He nodded and asked if I wanted to go after fault-based grounds or try to punish her financially. I said, no. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance, a clean break. Separate property stays separate, no alimony since we both worked, split the apartment deposit fairly, and move on. He said with that approach, assuming she didn't fight the obvious, we could be done in a few months. The first real sign that she finally realized I wasn't bluffing came about 5 days after I moved out. Security at my job called to say someone was in the lobby asking for me. It was Olivia. She looked wrecked, like she hadn't slept in days, and demanded to know what I thought I was doing. I kept a good couple of steps between us and told her calmly that if she had questions, she needed to contact my lawyer. She actually laughed and said, "You can't seriously be divorcing me over money." That was the one time I let myself say exactly what I felt. I told her, "I'm divorcing you because when your family told you to choose between them and your husband, you chose them, and I'm just respecting your decision." Her face went from angry to pale in a second. She started talking fast, saying I took it out of context, that she'd been under pressure, that she didn't really mean it like that. I reminded her she'd had weeks to stand up for our marriage while her family ramped up the pressure, that she'd sat silently during the ambush, and that when it mattered most, she sided with them. She reached out like she wanted to grab my arm. I stepped back, told her again that this conversation was over and any further communication needed to go through my lawyer, and walked back toward security. They escorted her out when she tried to follow me, and I filed a report with HR, not to get her in trouble, but to make sure there was a paper trail if things escalated. That same evening, Mr. Jensen called and said, "I need you in my office tomorrow. There's something you need to see." His tone was different, more serious, and I spent the whole night wondering what else could possibly be waiting. The next morning, I sat in his office while he opened a folder on his computer and showed me a series of screenshots, messages, texts between Olivia and her family from weeks before the ambush. What I thought had been an emotional blow-up was actually a planned operation. Caleb had written, "Once he sees everyone united, he'll cave." Olivia had responded, "I told them it's $85K. That should be enough to get started." Seeing my savings reduced to a number in a group chat, like I was some unwilling investor, stung in a way I wasn't ready for. Brenda had sent long messages about how to guilt-trip me, talking about real husbands and family unity. And Olivia had added suggestions like, if we make it emotional, he'll feel too bad to say no. They discussed where everyone should sit, who should talk first, how to build up the pressure so I'd feel cornered. It wasn't a spontaneous reaction, it was choreography. The message that hit the hardest was one from Olivia to Hannah, 2 days before everything blew up. It said, "If he really won't do it, I might have to choose them to make him understand we're serious, but he'll come around after." That single line told me everything I needed to know. To her, those words, "I choose them," were supposed to be a move in a negotiation, a scare tactic. She never believed I'd take them at face value. Mr. Jensen watched my reaction and asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer. It felt like my brain had to rewrite the entire last month with this new information. He said, "This is coordinated pressure. It's basically a plan to coerce you into handing over your assets. This gives you a very strong position if this goes to court." I asked how he even had these messages. He reminded me of the tablet we'd kept at home, the one I took with me without thinking because I bought it. Olivia had been lazy about her settings. Her messages were still syncing there through the same cloud account. Legally, it made things simple. The device was mine, the data was accessible, and what it showed wasn't ambiguous. I scrolled through weeks of them talking about me like a problem that needed to be solved. And somewhere around the 10th screenshot, any leftover sadness I had hardened into something colder. Mr. Jensen said we could absolutely crush her in court with these fault-based grounds, maybe even claims about attempted financial coercion. I thought about it and still said no. I didn't want to destroy her. I wanted to be done with her. The only thing I asked was that we use enough of the messages to make it clear we weren't bluffing, so she and her lawyer understood I wasn't someone they could push around. He pulled a few key screenshots, sent them to her attorney with a professional summary, and waited. It didn't take long. Within hours, her lawyer was suddenly much more cooperative, talking about how his client wanted to resolve things quickly and quietly. Over the next couple of weeks, we worked out a settlement that looked almost exactly like what I'd asked for on day one. She kept her things. I kept mine. We split the apartment deposit, and she signed off on having zero claim to my premarital savings or any assets in my name. No alimony, no support, just two adults cutting the cord. There was even a confidentiality clause that basically said neither of us could go around publicly trashing the other with details from the divorce. I signed the agreement as soon as it hit my inbox. She sat on it for a few days, probably hoping I'd blink, then finally signed, too. After that, all that was left was the waiting period and the court date. I honestly thought that would be the moment her family backed off. They'd lost the money play. They'd lost the control. What I underestimated was how badly some people take it when their manipulation doesn't work. Caleb started posting vague things on social media about people who choose money over family and fake husbands. Brenda called my mom, Nancy, crying about how I'd abandoned my poor wife over a small disagreement about investments. My dad, David, called me and asked what was going on. I gave him the short version. Her family tried to pressure me into dumping my savings into Caleb's crypto scheme. Olivia chose them over me. I filed for divorce. He was quiet for a second and then said, "Good. You don't need people like that in your life." That was the affirmation I didn't know I needed. But the family didn't stop. I started getting emails from throwaway accounts calling me selfish, saying I'd regret this, saying, "Real men take care of family." I got a LinkedIn message from someone using a fake name, but repeating phrases I'd heard Caleb use. I even got a letter at my new address that was nothing but guilt and insults. I forwarded everything to Mr. Jensen and kept blocking, staying completely silent. Eventually, the harassment turned into something more direct, and that's when things stopped being just annoying and started being dangerous. Mr. Jensen called one morning with a tone that put me on edge immediately. He said security at my office had reported that Arthur, my former father-in-law, had been sitting in his car in the parking lot for a couple of hours, waiting for me to show up. When I arrived, apparently, he got out and tried to approach my car before I even stepped out. I hadn't noticed because I'd been focused on my phone, but security did. They told him he needed to leave. He argued. They called the police. Nothing violent happened, but it was enough. Mr. Jensen used that incident combined with the messages and unwanted contact to get a restraining order. Within a couple of days, there was a court order saying my ex's family had to stay away from me, my home, and my workplace. I thought that would finally scare them into stopping. Instead, they shifted to petty tactics. A noise complaint got filed about my apartment, even though my neighbors knew I was quiet. My bank locked my account temporarily after multiple failed login attempts from unknown locations. My employer got a random negative review online naming me specifically as unprofessional, which my boss brought up, then tossed aside when I explained what was happening. None of it ruined my life, but all of it was clearly meant to rattle me. To remind me they weren't happy I'd walked away without giving them what they wanted. Every time something new happened, I sent it to Mr. Jensen. He documented everything and had another talk with their side, making it clear that if this continued, there'd be more legal consequences. Then the day of the final divorce hearing finally came. I won't pretend I wasn't nervous walking into that courthouse. I hadn't seen Olivia in person since the scene at my job. She was already there when I walked in, sitting with her lawyer, looking smaller somehow, tired, pale, eyes on the floor. She didn't look at me. I didn't try to get her attention. The hearing itself was almost anticlimactic. The judge looked through our agreement, asked a few standard questions to make sure we both understood what we were signing, and then asked, "Do you both agree this is fair, and you want this divorce finalized?" We both said yes. He signed the decree. Just like that, for years of marriage were over in under half an hour. Walking out of that building, I felt lighter than I had in months. The stress, the constant low-level anger, the second-guessing, it all lifted. Mr. Jensen shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, you're free." It sounded cheesy, but he was right. That night, I went to a decent restaurant alone, ordered a good meal, raised a glass of wine to no one in particular, and let myself enjoy the silence. I thought that was the end of the story. Life, however, had other plans. About 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Mr. Jensen called again. This time, he sounded almost amused. He told me the crypto platform my ex's family had poured their money into had been hit with a federal investigation. Accounts were frozen, withdrawals halted, and it looked like most investors were going to lose a huge portion of what they'd put in. From what he'd heard through back channels, her family had around $50,000 tied up in that platform between all of them. Gone, or as good as gone. "I know you're not the vindictive type," he said, "but you have to admit the irony here." And yeah, I did. If I had caved that night in my living room, if I'd let their pressure work, that $85,000 would have gone into the same black hole. Instead, my money was still sitting safely in my boring, normal accounts, untouched by their disaster. After the news about the platform broke, I started seeing blocked call notifications from numbers I recognized: Olivia, Brenda, Arthur, Caleb, all trying to reach me. Mr. Jensen told me her lawyer had reached out with a question that almost made him laugh. Would I consider helping them financially now that things had gone badly with the investment? The answer was a simple no. I didn't owe them a bailout from a fire they set themselves. Through a mutual acquaintance, I later heard how things fell apart in their house. Arthur and Caleb turned on each other, each blaming the other for losing the family's future. Brenda was furious about the chunk of retirement savings that had evaporated. Hannah was mad at everyone. And in the middle of that storm was Olivia, the person who'd once had a husband and a stable life, but chose to gamble all of it on loyalty to the wrong people. The acquaintance asked if I felt bad for her. I told them the truth: I felt nothing. Not hatred, not joy, just distance. She'd made her choices as an adult. The consequences were hers, not mine. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, a letter showed up at my new place, forwarded from my old address. 5 pages, handwritten. The return name was hers. I almost tossed it without opening it, but curiosity won. It was exactly what you'd expect. Apologies for everything. Claims that she'd finally seen how toxic her family was. Statements that losing the marriage was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Regret for saying, "I choose them." A plea to talk, to maybe start over. I read it once all the way through, then again more slowly. There were parts that felt honest and parts that felt like someone trying to rewrite history in a way that made them look less cruel and more confused. But none of it changed the simple, central fact. When it mattered, she chose. And I believed her. I folded the pages, walked over to my paper shredder, and fed the letter in until it was just strips. No dramatic gesture, no anger, just a quiet decision to keep her in my past where she belonged. Life after all of this turned out better than I expected. I got a promotion at work, started taking better care of my health, picked up hobbies I'd dropped, and eventually adopted a rescue dog that became my little shadow. My apartment wasn't big or fancy, but it was peaceful. There was no yelling, no manipulation, no one trying to calculate how to get to my bank account. My $85,000 stayed exactly where it had been through this whole mess, quietly growing instead of disappearing into someone else's vision. Every now and then, someone who knows the story asks if I regret how decisively I walked away. If I ever wonder if I should have given her another chance or tried counseling or waited for her to come around. The answer is no. When someone looks at you in the middle of a crisis and says, "I choose them," believe them. When they show you that your place in their life is negotiable, treat that as a final answer, not a starting point for debate. Olivia chose her family over me. I said, understood. Everything that followed, the divorce, the fallout, the crypto collapse, the letter, it was just the universe running the math on that moment. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need some big dramatic showdown. All I needed to do was quietly remove myself from the equation and let their choices catch up with them. And they did. So, after hearing all that, I have to ask, do you think I was wrong to believe her when she said, "I choose them"?